Welcome, everybody, to another episode of Strife's Sanctum podcast. My name is Citizen Strife, and it is the third anniversary of these podcasts. I remember coming up with the idea of doing this to kind of add to my channel in some sort of way because I was mostly just doing gaming stuff and turned into the kind of half video game review, half anime review sort of thing. And it's worked for quite a while. And, you know, in some small way, it's found a bit of an audience. I have enjoyed my process of doing that, but I also made an announcement a few days ago where I think there was a little bit more I could do in depth. And again, I'm not saying in-depth as in changing the way I process things, the way I do things, because the way I've done it, my schedule, come up with a topic, try to watch or play or do whatever, or, you know, in the case of something like this that we'll get to, know everything about it by just playing it so many times that it becomes kind of ingrained in me. And then trying to find a way to condense that into 20 minutes, 30 minutes, 45 minutes, sometimes an hour, sometimes in the case of Fruits Basket, 2 or 3, depending on how much is worth. But there is more that I can tackle, and I thought of that because there's going to be a point where I'm going to run out of stuff to just, okay, I have a game, let's talk about it. Surface level, or even as in depth as I possibly can get, there's a thing where it's just, all right, I've gone through these quite a bit, but am I going through them enough? Am I going into enough detail that I'm really explaining the game or the show or the whatever? So I made an announcement a day or so ago that I came up with the idea of trying to take a subject, for instance, a Persona 3, the vibe of it, the storyline and its themes, or talk about the music and its the way the music is structured or the way the music sounds or how it vibes with the characters, or the villains discussion, or something like that. Little bits and pieces of the game and dive into them a lot more. Thought process was like, say, Final Fantasy V. Well, the job system is such a big freaking thing in there. Well, why not talk about every little, you know, talk about the jobs that are available or the jobs that were in other versions, what they were, how you get them, what the nuances are, how that changes how you do things in the base game or a randomizer, stuff like that. Or how do you discuss somebody like a villain? You know, I talked about X-Death before in my Final Fantasy Villains rankings, but I didn't talk much about Gilgamesh other than being awesome. You know, dive into those appearances in other games and say, okay, this is why he's so important. Or just talk about the party in general, or how the dungeons are designed, or something like that. Or even in the anime sphere, I talked about Apothecary Diaries. Basically talked about Mao Mao, pretty much. Well, what are the examples of why she's so interesting a character? Same thing with Frieren. Why does Frieren work with Fern in that party? Or why do they keep switching back to Himmel and his party to make a choice or make a explanation of why the story is working the way that's working? Little things of that nature. Diving into a series a little bit more than I did at the surface level to try and get a little bit more out of this than I was doing. And even just going by the base Final Fantasy, like the first 10 games, I came up with like a good 50, 60 ideas, and I hadn't even gone through all of that. That was just me coming up with ideas for 10 to 15 minutes going, this sounds interesting, this sounds interesting. You know, this thing kind of snowballs. And then, you know, Legend of Mana, what about all that stuff? So little things of that nature. I haven't even gotten into the stuff with Persona or SMT or, you know, the stupid shit that revolves around that fan base where it's always like antagonistic for some reason. Kind of the same way like old school Final Fantasy fans, myself, and the newer ones always seem at odds for whatever reason, even though it's the same freaking franchise. You know, sometimes it gets old, you know, shit like that. But that was just something that I thought of as a, hey, much like the the fishing episode where I did fishing minigames and stuff, more stuff like that. More attuned to a certain game, though, as opposed to, okay, this is just a different little thing. This is going to be something, every so often I might throw in after a game review so that I get more in depth with a certain subject, because there are things about games that can really be dived into and never really explored completely fully when you're trying to go from thing to thing to thing to thing. And the same is going to apply to this, because I've talked about Persona 5, I then talked about Persona 4 because I did that, but then I just finished Persona 3 Reload, and it came at a time where it was perfect. Persona 5 gave this franchise commercial success. It had already gained critical success with Persona 3 and Persona 3 Fest way back in 2006, 2007, 2008. Persona 4 gave it a little bit more critical acclaim as well, but really Persona 5, with the advent of stuff like streaming and whatnot, getting a higher profile, getting more advertising, getting more marketing, and the way Persona 5 looked and felt and played, it exploded. It got 8 million copies sold or something crazy like that. For that franchise, it's insane. I don't know if Persona 3 is going to make that much, but the fact that in a first week it sold 1 million copies, which I don't even know the original did, this is something that, Metaphor, ReFantasios, they are going with that social sim meets JRPG, and most often darker RPG vibe. So what they did was they took the PS2 original that they'd worked on, which was very stiff and troublesome, and they gave it the Persona 5 coat of paint. So a lot of the stuff that I talk about is going to be the same with Persona 5. And even Persona 4, that quality of life jump is why they haven't really done a remake yet, but they're gonna. You could just bet your ass they're gonna. And they might do it for 1 and 2, but that's more of a underground kind of vibe. Those 3 games, 1 and then both of the 2 games, those are more straightforward JRPG dungeon crawls. This has that social element, that social link element that is such a staple of this sort of franchise and what it's known for now, that it's gonna be hard to find an audience for that. We saw that with early SMT5 until the remake came out. I'm gonna get into that someday, and then Soul Hackers 2. Those did not sell as well, which really is a disappointment because they're good games in their own right, but there was something about the way Persona 3 through 5 have hit something. And bringing it back and giving it a new chance has elevated this game to a higher level. I'm not saying it's perfect, but it gave it new life. And for better or for worse, that Persona 5 style is what the games are going to be going forward until they make more adjustments. And, because of course they're going to be working on Persona 6, and they have time to give it time to breathe. And the remake is the best way to play it because they do the smart thing. They don't change the story. They add to it without changing the narrative. So if you're looking for a way to change the game, it's not really there. Stuff in the story is going to stay the same way. This is not approaching it from a rebirth or remake perspective. You're not giving them a new story. You're giving them the old story done with modern convenience. And that is something that can work, especially since the modern convenience, the look and feel of, say, Persona 5, jam-packed into what was already a solid game with some issues. One of the main things was the voice acting changes. I maintain that the original voice cast in Persona 3 is one of the best. I would hazard to say like .hack GU has a run for its money, but it's the same crop of video game actors. Like if you played Persona 3 OG, you get Yuri Lowenthal, you get Michelle Ruff, you get Liam O'Brien, and others who have basically just been like always good at this sort of thing. And having to replace them with younger actors is a bit of a thing, because I don't know if in the Japanese version they changed them. So it was always going to be a little bit of a sticking point, and especially considering that dubs do not get a good vibe, which is annoying, as I've said. You have to go the extra mile to convince people that, why did you change a good thing? Well, you have to remember they're hoping that these people get into spin-off games, and the other actors could be into their 50s, 60s, sometimes into their 70s, or it could be a price issue. I don't know, but suffice it to say, most of the actors from before have been brought back into like smaller scale roles. So in the social links that have now been fully voice acted, I will love that to death, and I will talk about that in a minute. Those actors get bit parts in the game. Like Akihiko's original actor, Liam O'Brien, is now Officer Kurosawa. And Michelle Ruff is the not fortune teller lady, but antique shop owner. Shit like that. So they get bit parts as teachers, family members, associates, little things like that, while the new cast get to take over, barring one change where one of the actors stayed on as Elizabeth, which was a good choice. They did change how you get Elizabeth dates, which I will discuss, which was annoying, because I played Persona 3 as it came out. Day one, I almost never do day one releases. This was a special occasion where I just knew I'm the Persona guy, even more so than the Final Fantasy guy, so I'm gonna play that day one. And I was not disappointed, but I couldn't do everything, because the way the game works is they give you a shit ton more stuff to do, and it means that a lot of the social link stuff that you do gets shortchanged. But they also changed how Elizabeth works, in that you can't get all her stuff unless you get all her requests, and I'm not really a side quest guy, so bleh. I got less of the Elizabeth dates than I wanted, but it was still cool that Tara Platt, who was Elizabeth and Mitsuru in OG, stayed on to do this. You got Igor, voiced by Kirk Thornton, who was him in 5, so the same balance there. But by and large, the cast, and I'll talk over this, in terms of overall balance, it's just as good. Character by character, role by role, and again, this is not a reflection of the actors themselves. By and large, most of the time I'm going to side with the older, more experienced actors because I've heard them so much more. But if you're coming in and you've played the original and are like, why did they change the voice acting? This is going to suck. I can assure you it doesn't. And it gives a different vibe to it. But let's just say Makoto went from Yuri Lowenthal to Alex Lee. Alex was in Yakuza as AG in the new Yakuza game. A lot of the people in the Yakuza game now that I'm playing are in this, so it's going to be easy to go. But he was also in Rain Code as Vivia, the weird guy who would sleep under a piano and be with ghost visions and stuff. He basically, like, it's a thankless job. Really, what his voice acting stuff is Ryoji later in the game, or Pharaohs, and I would say it's a good change. I think he works better as Ryoji than Yuri Lowenthal did, but I think Yuri's voice is a little higher so that he can do the Pharaoh stuff, the weird creepy kid, a little better. And of course, he gets to do all the fun Persona shit. If I ever meet these people, I have to ask them what it's like to just sit in the booth and yell Satan Parvati, Lucifer, Orpheus, over and over and over, and getting it right, because there's like 300 of these fucking things that they got us talk about, because it's, them doing it. It's probably the same as like doing a fighting game or something. I guess went from Karen Strassman to Dawn Bennett, and Bennett's been in East 9 as Aprilis. She's in a lot of anime stuff. I mean, I'm watching stuff like Konohana, Kitan, and other shows where she's in it, and she has to go for a little higher register voice than I'm used to, because she's more of the thicker, deeper voice. But I would say this is not as pronounced a change. How would I describe it? The way Strassman approached this was she got more and more human the more and more she did, and it was a subtle change, and then it became her eventually acting as this, I guess, this robot who becomes quote-unquote human in a way. Bennett more or less plays it straight the entire way through. She never really sounds robotic. Whether that's a good thing or a bad thing, it's kind of the same way. Like I hear a lot of shit about Final Fantasy X's voice acting, and I get that. But the way like Yuna's voice actress was very stiff and kind of unsure of herself, and then later on became way more open and honest and forward, and just owned the scenery near the end. That's kind of how the original Aegis was. In this one, it's kind of what you see is what you get. It's a good performance. It's just different. You're not really seeing an alteration in her performance too much, other than she's getting to act more and do more. So it's about the same quality. Let's see. Yukari is Heather Gonzalez. I don't know. That's the thing about these new actors, is sometimes I don't know if they're from a whole lot, so bear that in mind. This is one of the newer ones. Heather Gonzalez plays Yukari, compared to Michelle Ruff. Now, I have not played The Answer yet, because that didn't come out yet. Yukari in The Answer is a complete bitch. I'm just going to say that. Not the actress. Michelle's great. But there's a sense in The Answer that Michelle plays Yukari like a just complete bitch. And there's always that tinge in her performance where Yukari is kind of standoffish for a reason. Not always the nicest person. She's one of those nice girls who has a mean streak sometimes. I would say Heather overall is a little nicer sounding person and doesn't come across nearly as catty or bitchy. But she still gets those one-liners in, and it's good. So I'm curious how The Answer is going to do. So I would say Ruff's performance is better, but I'm not going to say like a complete, it's not completely bad. Again, none of these are just completely worse, I don't think. This one is going to be interesting because I have to talk about Vic Mignogna again. Oh, goody. Junpei. So Vic Mignogna got blacklisted about a decade ago because Twitter stuff and convention stuff. It was a terrible thing. He was outed as a bad person. He does not work in the industry anymore. He was a decent actor, Edward Elric, Junpei, whatever. He was good. I liked him as Junpei. It was a good performance, but you can't really use him anymore. So, yeah, they went for the guy who was in Vanitas, the case study of Vanitas, as the main character, Zen Robinson. And I will say, he was the one that probably brought the biggest change. His voice is higher. He's got a bit of a sleazy voice, which works with Junpei really well. And it works. It works really well. And I think he got to shine quite a bit. And it's really good. And I think is going to be a good choice for Junpei going forward. Provided Robinson doesn't fall into the same trap Mignogna does, which I don't think he's gonna. That would be really stupid. Anyway, let's see. Mitsuru. Going from Terraplat to Allegra Clark, who was the boss in Somnium Files, which I just talked about. Cross the board, same vibe. She gets the role. She sounds almost like Terraplat did. Terra has a little higher voice. Allegra has a little lower voice, but essentially the same pitch, same feel. You almost couldn't even tell half the time. It's just good. Mitsuru was my favorite of the cast in the original game. She's still my favorite in this, and it's just like, oh, She sounds exactly like Mitsuru should. That's great. You know, it works. I remember the joke she made was, I think she got hired because she actually does speak French. So I thought that was funny. Akihiko, voiced by Alejandro Saab, and he's in Hell's Paradise, a show that was pretty weird. Very, very weird, to be honest. He was also in 86, which I've talked about. He plays him. How would I go about it? The way most of the Akihiko stuff is done in spin-offs, where he's just this meathead who talks about protein and studying, making it a test, and punching things really hard and doing things. Is he trying to replace Liam O'Brien? No. Is he as good as Liam O'Brien? No. There's just something about how good Liam O'Brien is and how wide of range he is as an actor that you can't really replicate. And again, Saab does about as good as he can, and is still good. But I would say Liam O'Brien wins here and there. This is going to be the one that is gonna win. Hands down. This is Fuka, voiced in this version by Suzy Young, who was Yuffie in the remake, and Chitose in Yakuza. Again, Yakuza Infinite Wealth. I'm playing it right now on my other channel. Hooray! But by and large, the original actress, Mela Lee, I think it was, just did not fit the role. And did not do a great job, and came off as very robotic, and maybe that was just the way they asked her to do it. I don't know. But this is the absolute slam dunk change. Susie's better at this character, and it's not even close. She actually tries to sound like she's supposed to sound, very meek, very timid, very unsure of herself, but filling a role that the party needs as its navigator. Boom. Don't even question it. Same with Ken Amada. You got Justine Lee. I don't know what Justine's been in. This is one of their first roles, and it's again one of the things where better version of the character, and they actually enhance Ken quite a bit because they give him more stuff, and I'll go into that when we talk more about the plot and the social link overhauls. Ken doesn't come across as bad in this, and part of that has to do with the role, part of it has to do with the way they present him, part of it has to do with the enhancements that they give to the game. Shinji, voiced by Justice Slocum, I'd say it's about the same as Grant George's. It's going to be the same level. And rounding out the cast, I'm not going to harp on this too much. It's good doggo. It's Koromaru. He's a good doggo. I think there's a little bit of annoyance because instead of like stock dog noises, they have somebody actually voice acting the ruff stuff, you know. But he's a dog. He does dog stuff. He runs around, does dog stuff. He is a dog. It is great. And he balances out the cast. All the complaining that you get about like Teddy and Morgana as mascots, and you have good doggo. Good doggo's gonna win because doggo does dog things. But you got your cast, and again, I would say cast-wise, it's the same. Now, why didn't I talk about their characters that much? It's because I'm going to as the story progresses. But it was a solid change all around, and again, I think dubs tend to get the worst end of the stick, even though now I think it's just like, dude, they're fine. Stop it. If you like what you like, the Japanese version is there. The English version is there. Like what you like. It doesn't have to be a problem. So I wanted to kind of allay fears if nobody's really played it yet and wondered, why did they change them? Well, sometimes you change actors, either to save money or because other people can't physically do it anymore. You don't know. There are many reasons why that happens. But by and large, they nailed them. They made some of the characters better, most of them about the same quality, maybe one or two that slightly worse, but it's fine. Wanted to get that out of the way so we can get to the other good stuff. The battle system. So, the one big drawback that Persona 3 always had, outside of two main issues, the one was the fact that the battle system was one main character and then a bunch of AI. You had a way to tier your AI a little bit, so you'd have Mitsuru not doing Marine Korean and fail all the time, barring instances of it actually working. You'd have control, and Persona 3 Reload allowed you to have. Persona 3 Portable allowed you to have control of characters, but that was on the PSP, so and they re-released that, but now that they've come out with Reload, there's really no reason to play there's no reason to play the portable version anymore. And well, outside of they wanting to do the female social links, those are the things. No female social links or female main character, so it is what it is. So I guess portable still has a thing over all this other stuff, but whatever. As far as the battles go, you have full, complete control of the party, and they're very fast. All of the main additions that you had in Persona 5, like Baton Pass, have been called shifting now. You get the same cool stuff, but by and large, it's all the little nuances, like you press a button and it can tell you if you have a weakness in an attack, and then automatically target a thing to just save you some time. You can do the rush mechanics. You can do the all-out attacks, which look cool. They get the split screen animation where they kill a thing, and now they speak while the backdrops. They don't. I don't think they're as good as Fist of Justice from Makoto, but they're close enough. I mean, you get like Koromaru dropping his weapon and just barking at the camera, and it goes woof woof or something like that. Other people are like punching the camera. You get Mitsuru doing the thing where she's like kneel before. Just little phrases that each character gets. All the fights are a lot faster, smoother. Walking around the world map or the Tartarus map is a lot better because they take from that like isometric, almost top-down view, which is hard to see, and they make it full visual, full 3D, and you can see everything. And some of the world in Tartarus looks a lot cleaner, a lot smoother, and sometimes a lot more creepy. Specifically the second block and the third. In the second block, you could see the faces right in front of you, and it had this weird, creepy, uncanny valley thing going on. In the third one, you had these like barriers in the entire block, which made it hard to know where to go. After a couple of floors, you kind of know the vibe of the floor and can get past it, but it's easy to get stuck. Tartarus allows you to get a lot of extra items in the areas and doing fun things, but one of the main additions to the fights was theurgy. And these are special things. These are kind of limit break-esque things that are leveled up slightly different depending on the character. So even Fuka gets in on it. So she'll gain her Oracle skill here and there, as she helps people out or as turns go by. So the running gauge gets faster. I would say Makoto gets his by shifting personas. You get, say Mitsuru, hers is tied to hitting status effects, so you can't escape Marine Korean. You just gotta live with it. But she at least gets a couple other different ones. Like she even gets some of them tied to damaging attacks for once. So they've retooled her to try and actually hit them more, and you'd be surprised how much more often it hits. But when in doubt, her ice skill still went out, but her theurgy gauge is increased by that. Or you get people who will buff the party or heal the party, or sometimes your HP has to be at a certain threshold and you'll gain more. Specifically Ken, his theurgy is broke as fuck later in the game, because you get the standard light attack, dark attack, lightning attack, whatever. The benefit is theurgy kind of ignores resistance, so not only can you attack it regardless, you can also use it as your method to attack a weakness. If you don't know if it's a weakness or not, it will still trigger a weakness unless it's an almighty skill. But the secondary theurgies later in the game are nice. And Ken's actually breaks things quite a bit because you can heal any character with like a phoenix. You know, it's basically the Phoenix summon from Final Fantasy. So everybody is revived if they're dead. They're fully healed, and you get a wall of both physical and magical attacks. It is nice. So it actually gives you a reason to use Ken because he's not only less annoying as a character, but way more impressive in battle. But everybody's kind of balanced about the same that they would be. All the stuff that they do is kind of the same that they would be. So Yukari's your healer and wind user, Junpei's your attacker and fire user, and physical is gets all three, blunt/pierce. So you're given that, you're given your usual attacks. The one addition that I'm happy that they got was light and dark attacks as opposed to just instant death. So you have damaging attacks and you have instant death. So you're not just stuck. That is something that Persona 5 did, which I'm really grateful for, because you can turn, you can do damage more often than you can do instant death. Instant death still works great, but it always felt limiting and very MP or SP. It felt like you're using it way too fucking much. So that's a good change. So if you just want to figure out the weaknesses and don't want to use all your SP, that's a way to do it. Bosses themselves get a drastic overhaul because your characters get theurgy and have a way to get around a lot of the damage problems. The bosses have been retooled to do more damage or to have a different strategy. I was fighting like the Lover's Arcana, and it would do one thing for like a third of the fight and then start adding in stronger attacks and actually would change kind of its entire attack strategy, not just to be charming opponents, but to try different things, but also to do other things. The Hanged Man Arcana, his whole thing was when he gets to attack, he gets to use something called Grim Transcendence, where he do multiple attacks at once. Almost unfair that he gets to do that shit. Even more so than getting 2 attacks per turn, he would get like 4 or some bullshit like that. Or the Gatekeepers, the level blocks. Sometimes they would be the same, sometimes they would be harder. Or you would be in Tartarus, and this is one of those changes that they made to Tartarus. Might as well talk about that now. The biggest drawback in Persona 3 is Tartarus. That's your dungeon. You're climbing the dungeon, you're fighting those bosses, you're fighting the full moon bosses, and those are fun, but they only do so much for the story. But you're climbing Tartarus to get to the top of the tower by the end of the game. And they try to change it up by giving you things called monad doors, where you go into a door and then you find it a thing, and then you fight a harder enemy. Sometimes you fight multiple harder enemies, mostly near the end of a block. And then sometimes you would fight gatekeepers. They'd be 1 per floor. But sometimes you'd have multiple floors in a row of fights, and you'd have to kind of teleport out and then save and then retool your party. Or you would just run in guns blazing. I would usually just run in guns blazing with whatever party I had, for better or for worse. Fuka gets a few more search options. Like later on in the game, she can just warp you to the next floor, for a fee of SP, not money. Or she can turn the enemies distressed, or you'd have these enemies imbued with a status effect or something like that, and you'd fight them, and they'd be in rage mode, or they'd be whatever. You still have the effect where the enemies of lower levels run away from you and are distressed, so you can hit them harder. Greedy monsters show up, and they're like bigger versions of the wealthy monsters and the rare monsters. The rare monsters still run away, but the game will tell you if they're on the floor. So as you enter a new floor, it'll say, okay, the lights are out. Get the fuck out because the Reaper's coming. Or there's less enemies on the floor, the Reaper's coming, get off the floor. or the rare monster's there, so go find it. And you chase it down and you get a lot of good stuff. Other floors later on would be called the greedy monsters, and you can use Fuka to do all the work for you if you have the SP for it, or you can play a kind of a little mini game of going left or right and chasing it down and trying to stop it. And then if you can beat it, you get a lot of it. You got a lot of experience. You get a lot of items and money, and you can go to the floor. You also get this feature where if you get through a monad door and beat a boss, you get to go up the next 2 floors pretty much for free. And of course, monad still exists, but you have to deal with the Reaper. But because they've cut down the staying on the floor when knocking down and getting dizzy wastes your turn. Well, he can't be dizzied anymore, and he can't be put on the floor, so Thunder Rain doesn't work. So I wasn't able to personally do that. So I don't really know what monad proper later in the game does do, but I still beat the game around level 75, 80-ish, so it's not like I needed to do it. But for people that are wanting the challenge, the Reaper's still there. The Reaper still hurts like a bitch, because of course he does. It's the Reaper in a Persona game. Of course he's going to be hard if you can't cheese him out of it. The plot doesn't really change. And this is where a lot of it moves. You have your main character join the group early April. He goes to Gekukan High School, learns his Persona thing because he finds out that shadows have been infesting the city. So every full moon, bigger shadows show up and they have to gather them and whatever. The story progresses in the same way of that nature. The story really gives you a sense that these people have lives other than themselves, other than just, I don't think they're buddy. That's the thing that I think Persona 3 always had trouble with, was making them feel like friends. And while it's still true, they still feel like a little bit closer in this version than they did before. But when the shit hits the fan near the end of the game and people start dying or other things start happening, you start getting these extra instances of, hey, we're learning more about these characters. You don't have to do it, but they'll tell you, hey, Junpei wants to spend extra time, or Shinji wants to spend extra time doing blah, 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 or Mitsuru wants you to talk to Shinji to, progress that storyline off in a bit. The way they've enhanced the character dynamic is to give you more stuff to do at night or in the afternoon. They'll say Koromaru's sitting at a bench somewhere or sitting out front the thing. You want to go people watching with Koromaru? I'm like, why would you say no to Good Doggo? Because Koromaru is a good dog. So he's got his own storyline too, where a lot of people are kind of recognizing him. He's the town dog basically, and he's a nice guy. He's a nice dog. Everybody knows him and respects what he's gonna do. You do that, or you get to raise plants in the garden upstairs, and other people in the party will help you out with that and then enhance their social thing. The reason they do that is you can improve your stats by talking to them in those story bits, but the more you do them, you get 4 or 5 sequences in, they level up a boon to their theurgy, or they get an overall passive buff or something. So Yukari can heal more, or somebody does more damage of a certain type, or they get just some benefit. So you get a reason to want to be around these people a lot more. That being said, though, what being around the characters more often means is that they give you less time to spend on the social links that do exist. So the Tanakas, the Mutatsu, the monk guy, I didn't even do those because I was so busy trying to focus on the social links and trying to level up my stats because I wanted Mitsuru's social link, that I didn't really have time to do the night stuff because I spent more time dealing with the characters, which is in its own way a good choice. You're given time to be around people and do social links. Now, the characters themselves don't have their own social links, outside of the female options. So that is one thing that I think the portable version has over this. A lot of the social links in Persona 3 are on the weaker side, but this game tries its best to give you something more by giving it fully voice acting. This is something I've wanted since 3, and I'm finally glad that they finally did it. Fully voiced social links. In 4, they were not voiced at all. In 3, they were not voiced at all. In 4, you'd get the first bit and then maybe some random bits at the end, near the end of the social link. 5, you'd get the first one and the 10th one. This is fully voice acted now, so everybody gets full life. You get to talk to them. You get to see them as people, And as far as like social links go, Yuko, the team manager, she gets the best social link. Her character, her actress is amazing. She sounds like an actual person, not involved in your persona bullshit. She's just a normal girl with a life. And comes across as a person, as opposed to a dramatic person that you have to save. She just deals with her shit and goes about it, and it sounds almost natural. It's kind of uncanny. I would play that social link stuff just for that one, but then you'd have the Bookworms one, the old couple. They were a good change too. You get to hear fully voiced social links. This is something that I wish that they'd had early. I'm finally glad that they've done that. And again, maybe the Japanese versions had them all along and we just now finally got them dubbed. I don't know. But it's a positive change. I hope they just stick with it going forward. In fact, every game should have full voice acting forever if you can manage it. I know that takes a lot of effort and money, but still, it adds to the effect. You get to talk to these people more. They talk to you more. They feel more realistic. You're not reading from a thing anymore. You're having them react to what you're saying, So that's a huge change. Just being able to have more things to do gives you more options, because there are some people that want to 100% the game. I'm sure you can do that if you want. I don't think that's feasible with the setup now, but I find Persona's at its best when you're given stuff to do and you just do it. Like, I didn't do near as many social links in this version as I do in the other ones because I had more time with the actual party. I got to learn more about Ken and kind of slowly, not hate him as much, kind of see how he ticks and see how different tragedies kind of inform who he is or why he is who he is, or spend time with Junpei goofing off, or sitting and watching TV with Good Doggo or Yukari, or learning to beat up punks with Akihiko. Everybody gets their own little sub-story, which is great because it adds more to the thing. Because the base game is still there and still good, but you're kind of left, you're only doing Tartarus. Music-wise, nothing's changed. A different singer, I forget the name, but it's a little more, I don't know, it's not as unique of a singing voice as the original, so the songs themselves, if you like arranged versions versus the original, I mean, it is what it is. I don't think any of the songs are drastically different. Persona 3's the song list in general is weaker than 4 and 5 to begin with. So outside of Mass Destruction and the Battle for Everyone's Souls, the final boss themes, I'm not going to say it's a great list of songs. Persona 4 and Persona 5 had it beat. But yeah, really, if you can deal with Tartarus and Monad, you can enjoy Persona 3. And I would highly suggest not even playing any of the other versions anymore, because Reload is such a unique beast. And it doesn't really take all that much longer of a game. It's about the same length. It's just more of the stuff that you could have wanted. Like, anything that they've learned to do from 4 and 5 and any spin-offs, they've added to this. And it is a very good version. If you want if you want the female social links and the female main character, you can still play the portable port on PS4. I don't think people like that version as much, but or you can dig out a PSP and do it that way. But would I suggest playing Persona 3 Reload? I don't know. I think I've made my case pretty damn clear. It is very good. I liked Infinite Wealth more for what it gave me, but Persona 3 has been a revelation in what this game could have been with some new coats of paint, and I'm glad they did it. I am really pleased that I'm at this into my fourth year. And like I said, I'll get my schedule posted rather than run it down right now. I have to kind of race and get some physical therapy and stuff in before work. But I'm going to try and do a little bit more in-depth stuff as we go here and there. One of those things is playing Bloodstained again, so I'm going to be doing a couple of videos on that one soon. But other than that, I'm going to call it here for now, and I'll see you next time. Citizen Strife, signing off.